Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to another Esports Studio with myself, Ben Constanduros. And if you've been watching over the last couple of weeks, you'd have known that we've got this kind of thing going on where we're talking to the big bosses and the organisers of various esports events around the world. Last week, a great chat with one of the men that's kind of kicked that off, Thomas Yakimayev from Fanatec. And of course, before that, we talked to the boss of IMSA, the boss of SRO about their esports programs. But what we hadn't really delved into too much as yet, other than speaking to Jarno Opmeer last year, was F1 Esports. And yes, it sits in a slightly different area to most of the traditional esports events that we have been covering here at VCO, but it's certainly the most important, I believe, in our motorsport sphere. So the man to talk to is Dr. Julian Tan, who effectively is responsible for F1 Esports. I know it's a big team effort, Julian, but really, without you, I feel like we wouldn't have it.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here, Ben. And no, it's absolutely a team effort. I think that I do a lot of these interviews, but there is an amazing, amazing team behind what you see on the screen across Formula One, our partners at Codemasters and Gfinity that put on our spectacular show in esports and Formula One esports.
Right, so let's focus on the latest news effectively. And of course, F1 bringing out yet a new game as they do every year. How does the new game impact on your F1 esports programs?
You know, I think we are in such a special position where every year we've got an amazing game that our partners at Codemasters continue to develop and continue to release, and it creates a lot of exciting opportunities within esports. You know, I think that like any esports, the game is central to the entire strategy, and the entire approach, and ultimately the product that comes out. So, you know, we are very fortunate to have a quality game, one with such amazing graphics. It helps us sort of bridge a little bit with our, I guess, overall strategy in esports, which is trying to combine the power of esports with the magic of Formula One. And by having an authentic product, which our officially licensed game is, it helps us to deliver an authentic experience by way of not just participation of our gamers who are, you know, taking part in our esports competition, but also the viewers who are, you know, consuming the esports races, who we are seeing are increasingly not just gamers themselves, but actually racing enthusiasts, people who enjoy racing in all shapes and form. And for them, esports is just another form of racing virtually that they can really get behind. I think that also with the game, you know, continuing to evolve and continuing to get better and better each year, what it's enabling us to do is continue to elevate our esports experience for, you know, our fans, and also not to mention our incredible partners who are on this journey with us, whether that be the 10 Formula One teams or, you know, indeed our commercial partners in Aramco, DHL, and Fanatec as well.
So we've seen across pretty much gaming in general, I suppose, but with us specifically, motorsport gaming and esports competitions grow hugely since the pandemic began around a year ago. How does that have an impact on both your competitions, but also the platform as well?
You know, I think what we saw in 2020, I would probably think is a, you know, such a unique set of circumstances that actually in the midst of all of the challenges that we were facing as a business, as, you know, being in media entertainment and sports in particular, esports really shone a light on the possibilities of how we could redefine what it means to go racing, to be entertained by racing. You know, I think when we invested in this space in Formula One esports back in 2017, obviously nobody would have expected that in 2020 we'll be going through a global pandemic. But having been in that situation, I think a lot of us looked back at the decision for us to jump headfirst into the world of esports in 2017, really paying off in 2020. I mean, we were already seeing massive year-on-year growth from 2017 to 18 to 19. But when we, you know, when we're in this unique circumstance where pretty much the entire industry had to go dark, not just across motorsports, but sports and media entertainment in general, live entertainment. You know, esports really was brought to the forefront. And it gave, I would say, the industry a real opportunity for people to give it some consideration, and some exposure. I think previously I would oftentimes hear people saying to me, why would I watch someone else play a video game? And I think that when we were in this situation where the only live sport that was available was our esports, there was a lot more consideration, a lot more exposure. And what we saw was tremendous uptake, I would say, having given this form of entertainment a go. We saw this in our F1 Esports Series 2020 numbers, which we had to do online, obviously, last year due to COVID. And the numbers that we saw were record numbers, whether it was in terms of participation. We saw over 100% growth in our participation. Our viewership also close to 100% growth. And that's testament to an already rapidly growing product. Years, from 2019 to 2020 and 2018 to 2019, we're already seeing high double-digit growth. But just to see that continual acceleration of our growth just was testament to really the spotlight and attention that what we were going through as a sport or as an industry in COVID really did give us an amazing opportunity to showcase esports and showcase its merits, and continue to entertain and get our fans, young and old, into this alternative form of entertainment.
Backtracking a little bit to the beginnings, to 2017, as you mentioned, how tough was it to get this idea across and get the bosses of Formula One kind of invested and positively for the idea of racing online? We had a conversation with SRO and IMSA a couple of weeks ago also, and it does seem that there are some organizations that have made it much harder than others to get into this space. And I suppose with you guys, at least you were new. Liberty was a new owner to Formula One, and it wasn't like trying to persuade the old owners to do new tricks.
There was a real focus after, when the Liberty acquisition of the sport was complete. There was a real focus to prioritize and champion our sort of digital opportunities and digital initiatives. And this was testament across our entire digital suite, whether that is our website to the launching of a product within OTT and F1 TV, or opening up social media. And the same was true for esports. I would say that esports as an industry was identified as a fast-growing industry, and one that actually made a lot of sense with our business. I think that there are a lot of things as a business or as a sport that we have fundamental challenges in. So for example, motorsports is not as accessible a sport as, say, tennis or basketball. And so we lack that ability to have our fans really truly participate in that sport in a way that allows understanding, uptake, appreciation. And so esports was a real driver to help bridge that gap. And I think we saw the potential of that sort of on paper. But back in 2017, you're right. I think it's a completely new business. We were also operating at a pace where we were launching 101 different initiatives. So we had to prioritize on which ones would bring the most value to us. I think that when we launched in 2017, there was cautious optimism around the space. We knew that the fundamentals of how the industry was growing would help to provide a good basis for how we would play within the space. And also, not to mention, we were in a very unique position where, as a rights holder, we have a terrific game, developed by Codemasters that we could leverage. And I don't think many sports are in that unique position to have such great partners and a great product to serve as the basis for what would be our fastest growing digital asset, I would say, in Formula One esports. So a lot of different things came together. But you're right. I think it's still a new area. So there was we did take a test and learn approach, as we always do with any digital product. My background is in digital transformation and strategy. That's where I came from before joining Formula One. And the approach that we took on esports mirrored, the launch of F1 TV, for example, where you want to go to market quick, but at the same time, you want to learn and iterate very fast. That's the nature of digital products. And that was the approach that we took with esports, and we immediately saw a huge uptake in esports off the back of our first pilot. So we had hard data to support our hypotheses there to continue to invest in this space, and ultimately it paid off, right? I think we've seen tremendous growth in this space. Most recently, Nielsen cited our esports series and our esports activities, along with our Netflix Drive to Survive series, as being the real drivers towards the younger generation taking up Formula One as a sport, as a fan. They were estimating that Formula One is on track to grow to 1 billion fans by 2022. And of that, 77% of that is actually driven by fans below the age of 35. And they cited esports as one of the key initiatives that we have launched in order to kind of, build that pipeline to secure the future fan base of Formula One. So, I think a lot of things came into play at the right time, and not without obviously some clear strategic approaches in playing in what is quite a new and complex space for us.
Absolutely. But do you believe that F1 esports, and I'm not talking esports in general, because I think the sim racing side of things that we've covered quite a lot here on VCO before considers themselves kind of nicher than F1 esports. Do you believe that you can rival or join the likes of Fortnite and League of Legends as being one of those esports highlights around the world?
I think there are a couple of considerations when thinking about a question like that. I think that there are a lot of advantages that sim racing is able to leverage that maybe a Fortnite or a League of Legends may not necessarily be able to. I cite the blurring of lines between our real world and our virtual world being a key one. And that has been a real strategic driver in terms of realizing the potential for Formula One esports. But at the same time, they are fundamentally also very different products. So, for a game like League of Legends or Dota, Call of Duty, or sort of these strategy fantasy games, let's call it, quote unquote, traditional esports games, their game provides a different proposition, in that the people who take up that game kind of want to escape reality. They want to kind of experience something that you're not able to experience in real life. Whereas the proposition for simulation games is a little bit different, where for us at least, the potential to jump into a Formula One car is not something that most people get to experience. So this is about bringing a real world experience to people. And I think that because of those fundamentals being different, you will have that playing out in terms of the size of the gaming user base across all of the different titles, and that should inform how you think about growing your product. And that's certainly how we think about how we grow Formula One esports as a product for us. But to answer your question, will it ever be sort of in the same ranks? I think we're already seeing, we're kind of sort of year 4 going on year 5 in Formula One esports. And Formula One esports consistently ranks in terms of awareness, in terms of fandom, in terms of uptake, alongside these big, behemoths, as I will call them, in the esports industry, the likes of League of Legends and Call of Duty. Most recently, we were nominated in the Esports Awards alongside these amazing esports initiatives, these esports series, and to be just named next to them, the likes of FIFA, the NBA 2K League, or Call of Duty League. All of these are, I think in the short span of time that we've been operating is a real testament to the pace of growth that we've been able to do. And in fact, most recently, I saw a research report by GWI that actually cited simulation sports or simulation games being the fastest growing segment within the gaming industry, and that's across all genres, right? And that, I think, is testament to the real growth that we have seen over COVID, but also just the direction of travel that we're going more generally when it comes to kind of bridging those real world experiences with the virtual world. And also within that same report, actually, GWI cited Formula One Esports as being one of the top 3 esports leagues within, alongside Dota, Call of Duty in certain markets around the world, like Italy and Mexico. So, we're already seeing the huge growth of this opportunity for us. I think it's a question of, how much more the growth can be sustained. I do think that there is a lot more potential for this, but I think it's really important for a brand like Formula One to play a main principal position in trying to push this industry and push the growth of this industry, given the brand reputation, given the expertise that we have. I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of helping to grow the sim racing industry just more generally across gaming.
You mentioned shared experiences, blurred lines. Is it important for F1 Esports that the likes of Jarno Opmeer, for instance, who has a decent amount of real world experience, eventually appears at some point back in a real world car? A bit like you had Igor Fraga doing it with GT Sport, and we've seen a couple of others do it as well. But do you think that would legitimize the F1 Esports platform further than you already have?
I think Yarno's story is an incredibly fascinating one. And first of all, I think Yarno is a terrific, terrific athlete. He is one of the nicest, most humble esports drivers out there, incredibly talented. So I'll start off by saying that. I think his story is incredibly interesting. I think we've always tended, or the industry, I would say, has always tended to be based on the premise that esports provides this, this kind of stepping stone into real world motorsports. But Yarno's example, along with a few of other esports drivers in the past, like Graham Carroll, for example, have gone the other way. And I think this is a really important distinction, because esports, yes, is an amazing tool to find your next, crop of talent to kind of transition into real world, but also it's an incredible opportunity to continue to engage our fans, motorsports fans, racing fans who, previously had a career in motorsports. And, I think, let's be honest with ourselves, it can be a very cost intensive industry to sustain. So it's incredibly, I think, sort of heartwarming and encouraging to know that esports actually provides another sort of touch point for the engagement into the world of Formula One. And I think that it is incredibly, important that we think about how we can redefine what it means to be involved in the world of Formula One, to be a driver in the world of Formula One. I think that all of those elements are such incredibly important and fascinating questions that esports sort of helps us probe a little bit more. But, I think when Yarno won the Formula One Esports series last year, he, as a driver champion for us, it further showed how close, those two worlds are, the real world and the virtual world, that he was able to actually transition from being a real world professional racing driver into becoming an esports champion. And that is a very unique set of circumstances that, as a fan of Formula One, or as a fan of motorsport, I think it gives you, a sense of, I guess, a sense of participation, a sense of belonging as well, in a different way with our sport, which, I think is what we're trying to achieve just more generally, in breaking down the barriers into our sport through esports.
And what about the guys like Rasmussen? You mentioned Graham Carroll already, James Baldwin, Enzo Benito, guys that are super fast on other platforms in the esports racing sphere. Is that important to have those guys come into F1 Esports, or go the other direction and be F1 Esports drivers and then head into other platforms as well? Does that bring you closer to the other competitions that exist in the world of motorsport?
I think that there are a lot of transferable skills across each of the different racing games. At the end of the day, they are very different games. So,
Yeah.
in order to like truly perform and excel, even a 1% difference makes a huge difference in the outcome. However, having said that, they're all racing games at the end of the day, and we've seen our athletes really transition from game to game. I think the Formula One game is um, a terrific game because it actually is able to kind of bridge this, what I would call maybe the hardcore sim racing genre with the more accessible casual elements, which I think is really important, right? When we think about growing the opportunity just more generally. I think it's important that you build a pyramid or a funnel that is, that helps to continue to grow the addressable space that we're trying to operate in. I think that to answer your question, I think it's terrific to see. I think it's an amazing opportunity for these kids to use Formula One esports as a platform to launch their their ambitions in real life motorsports, if that is what it is. I think Cembo Lugbasi is a brilliant example where he has transitioned into Formula 3 now, and we discovered him back in 2017 in our inaugural Formula One esports series, and he's used that
Mm.
opportunities and the platform that he was given in order to pursue his dream, which is to become a real world racing driver. I think at the end of the day as well, it's important to note that Formula One esports as a product is something that, whilst is useful, that it creates and is helpful and really powerful, that it creates these narratives, transitioning from virtual to real. I think there is a real proposition in esports in itself as well. I think that when you watch an esports race, you will understand why millions around the world watch our Formula One esports racing, because it's incredibly competitive. All cars are equalized. You will have our drivers sort of being more risk taking because it's a game, so they're able to kind of make maneuvers that you probably wouldn't see in the real world. And I think that creates a really sort of engaging form of racing entertainment that ultimately, I think does stand on its own. And we can see that from the numbers itself, that these kids who are fans of the sport are now becoming stars of the sport because of the amazing
Yeah.
product that they're able to kind of create and the communities that they're able to kind of engage with. Marcel Kiefer is such a great example of one of our drivers who really engages his fan base in a way that's very intimate and inclusive and in a very positive way, which I think is really important when you think about growing the fandom and growing the following and just wider fan base of esports and motorsports esports more generally.
And just to kind of emphasize on that point, I heard a story about the recent transfer of Brendan Lee from Mercedes to Ferrari. And with that, he has moved to Maranello to be with his teammates, to be surrounded by the Italian feeling, to use F1 esports to allow him to see the world. So that was a really fascinating story and shows just how much these drivers are engaged and care about themselves being part of F1 esports. Let's talk about this year then. We are coming up to the season. One of the big things that you guys have already launched, if you like, is this dedicated F1 qualifier for females. Why is that important?
I think that we are operating in such a unique set of circumstances where the fundamentals for sort of equality are there. It's a game at the end of the day. So it comes down to how much people want to kind of invest their time in and
Yeah.
how much they want to kind of get better at the game. So the fundamentals, whether you are male or female, old or young, able body or disabled body, it doesn't matter. You should be able to kind of perform well. I think we are obviously operating, and this is just systemic in across not just motorsports but sport and just society at large, right? I think that there are a lot of systemic biases, institutional biases that discourage sort of uptake and participation, which ultimately means that on paper, you see, okay, you're working with a product that should, in theory, provide equal opportunity. But why is it that in 4 years of Formula One esports, 4 years of searching for an esports driver, we've never had a female qualifier? There are real systemic biases that actually drive these, right? And I think that it's endemic across gaming and esports at large. You just have to look at, female streamers as an example, the kinds of comments that they may get when they stream, the environment itself, I would say, has still a long way to go. Let's put it that way. Still a long way to go in order for certain parts or certain demographics to feel sort of safe in a way to put themselves out there and give it a go. And I think because we are operating in an environment that does not necessarily encourage that, we wanted to play a role, an active role in trying to encourage that participation. At the end of the day, the women's wildcard that we launched isn't solely about finding that female driver this year. It is a longer term project. It's a longer term ambition for us to help build the fundamentals, to help grow that grassroots participation. Because ultimately, I once heard a very poignant quote where you won't aspire to be something if you can't see yourself there. And the reality is that right now, in the esports space, it is predominantly dominated by white males, and that's a fact, right? It's about how can we think about being a little bit more disruptive to that in a way that we can encourage further participation. And also, I think important to note that the women's wild card is giving an opportunity to our female fans to have a chance to be picked by the Formula One teams. It is not a championship, so to speak, where we crown an esports champion. It's more about giving them the opportunity to be picked by a Formula One team who will then progress and get trained up by the Formula One team to compete in the Pro Championship. That is the premise of our Pro Exhibition, previously the Pro Draft, where we're trying to find the best talents, both not in terms of where they are now, but also the potential that they can show in the future. And the reality is the teams do pick not just on performance, but they also pick on other considerations, whether that's potential, whether that's personal fit with the teams when thinking about which drivers will represent their brand come the Pro Championship. So I think that that's a really important distinction to be made, because this is all about providing accessibility, is all about providing an opportunity to a demographic that we will hope will then encourage our female fans to actually see, hey, look, this, it's not all white males who are taking part in this competition, and take up more consideration. At the end of the day, I think that it is a much more nuanced issue, and one that's not easy to solve, and will take a lot of time and many years to kind of get to where we are. But we have to we feel very strongly that we have to try and explore what are the kind of avenues we have to us to help encourage certain trends to kind of get to where we would like to be as a sport, and just as an industry, I suppose, as a whole.
It's a very interesting one, and there's a lot of discussion around it. I suppose you would have seen the reaction from not just males and females as well, and different reactions and different perceptions of what that particular draft means to various people. And personally, I think it's a really good thing to try and get females involved. I'm curious to see whether we do end up with a female in the competition itself. But as you say, it's a good stepping stone, and it's a long-term thing. And I think that's really important. What other plans have you got for this new season? It feels as though you guys have got yourselves a really nice structure, and you're kind of sitting on that structure. Is there any big innovations that you've got planned for the future years?
Yeah, I think one of the key priorities, call it sort of year 2, year 3 of our project, this program that we wanted to achieve was to create a more structured, repeatable sort of format, because obviously we wanted to create a regular cadence to how the tournament and how the series at large sort of operates, because it provides visibility, it will just have greater uptake, because people will know, okay, in this time of the year there will be the pro draft, at the end of the year there is the pro championship to tune into. All of that I think is important when you start to sort of cultivate expectations and habits in terms of consumption, from a consumption perspective. I think also it provides visibility and certainty and structure when we're building the asset at large, when we're having commercial conversations with our sponsors or with our broadcasters as to when these shows will come out, and also just more generally in terms of our gamers, they will know when qualification is open. I think all of that is really important. So I think where we are now, sort of year 4 going on year 5, we've landed on a structure that we feel quite good about. I think that innovation is in our blood. Having said that, I think innovation is in our blood, and I think it's important that we continue to innovate and think about the longer term potential of esports. I think there are sort of strategic reviews that we're doing at the moment, where we're sort of exploring how to kind of where the industry will go, sort of call it 3, 5, 10 years time. How are we positioned within that? And it's important that we are aware of that so that we can repivot where necessary. But yeah, for this year, I think we've got a great structure. We're looking forward to kicking off the pro exhibition next month, and get the kind of the pro season going. I think that we've already seen amazing uptake, I would say, in terms of participation for our game, which we will announce sort of in due course. But esports is just continuing to grow, and like I said from the beginning, around sort of developing digital products, it is imperative that we take a test and learn approach. We have to be nimble, and we have to be flexible in our approach on how we grow, and have the courage to take risks. And if some risks may pay off, some risks may not, but it's important to do that, because nothing is static in this world, and the only thing that's constant is change. So you need to have that kind of innovative, flexible, nimble mindset more generally.
Julian Tan, thank you so much for chatting with us, and we definitely used up all of our 30 minutes. I think what's fascinating for me is just how much thought goes into effectively a load of people racing online each other. There are so many competitions out there. There are so many organizers out there, but nobody, in my opinion, thinks about it as hard as F1 Esports, and you're the figurehead of that. So it's fascinating to always hear your views.
Thank you, Ben. That's very kind words. Really appreciate it.
Well, there you go then. VCO Esports Studio is over for another week, and I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of weeks where we've been chatting to some of the real big shakers in the world of esports racing. I can't tell you who's coming up next week. I just don't know. But make sure you do tune in every Monday at 8 o'clock on our YouTube channel for more guests from the Esports Studio. For now, though, enjoy your week, and ciao.